Hey everybody, welcome to the Social Value Show. My name is Alan. I am the host of the show, and today we are expanding on our series of ownership and decision making, and of course, we are talking about employee ownership. It is something I've been a huge advocate of for a long time, mostly because I came from a laboring family. My first experience in the marketplace was that as an employee. I worked at Sam's Club, I worked at big corporations that were hotels. And the truth of the matter is you learn a few things about how it feels to work in those environments, and those things you take with you as you set up your own business. And from the moment I set up starting this company, I knew that I wanted to share the ownership and the decision making because of my experience on the other side, where I was an employee. And even though I recognized issues that I can be helping out and improving on, no structures existed in any corporation I've ever worked for that really allowed me to participate and to make a difference, even if it was just in a small part of my own work. And so, when I think about why I'm passionate about employee ownership, it really comes down to three things. The first is I believe employees are the largest value creators in an organization. When you compare the type of value a consumer brings, like even your biggest consumer, they might spend like $10,000 a year if they're like drinking your wine and cider and eating your food or maybe throwing a party. Like that's going to be the maximum amount of value that you see from like a consumer. As an investor, someone might invest say $100,000 and you amortize that at 10% interest. There's a certain amount of value that it brings and there's certain costs associated with it, but it still pales in comparison to an employee that, let's just say for easy math, gets paid $50,000 a year, but they have the ability to produce value based on their level of productivity, based on their level of ownership. And so some employees might get paid $50,000 and bring $40,000 worth of value. You can kind of get a sense of what an organization like ours would want to do with someone like that. We'd want to either get them to improve or let them go. Why? Because you're going to see employees in the company that cost $50,000 and bring $60,000, that bring $70,000, that bring $100,000 of revenue, of value, of contribution to this whole thing that makes it work. And so that is tremendously large. And I believe of all the owners in a social value enterprise, employee ownership and employee owners are the biggest consideration in making the company successful. The second reason I'm a big advocate for employee ownership is because I believe that, you can't be truly free in like the world, right? If you don't have agency, and that agency comes from ownership. It comes from saying I have say in this company. And so I think for the type of world that I personally want to live in, you can't live in a world where certain people have no say whatsoever, and then certain people have all the say. That creates negative outcomes. The third is I believe the better off employees are, the better off the economy is. All the best economists who know the relationship between the consumer economy and the laboring economy is that the people who spend the vast majority of their income are laborers. And so in that sense, the more money you put into a laborer, an employee's pocket, the more money you'll see in circulation as it relates to consumption, and that will lead to a very robust and economy with a ton of vitality. And so those are the three reasons why I've always been a big fan of employee ownership. But here's the deal. I have concerns. I've got so many of them. A lot of them come from my own personal history. If anyone knows my story, they know that I was a valet for a good 4 years before I transitioned to starting this company. I started it with my savings from those tips and everything. And when I was a valet, I was in a tip pool situation, and it was very obvious how things worked in that. There were freeloaders, there's people who didn't hardly do any work and they got the same amount of tips. And then there was a few of us who were hard workers, who always ran as fast as we could to get the cars, who did customer service better than everyone else. And we would essentially get the same pay as them. And back to meritocracy, this has informed why I believe so strongly in a meritocratic approach, as opposed to an approach where, in the case of laboring unions, which I was a part of a union as a valet, all of these people who were deadbeats, who did not know how to run for cars and just freeloaded on the rest of our hard work, they could not get fired for the life of the company. And it was because the union existed. And I don't think that was a beneficial thing for either the company or for society. I think that, in that sense, unions are doing a disservice to the rest of the laboring class who truly knows how to work hard and knows that there is an underlying agreement from employer to employee. And that is, you are there to produce value for the company. And if for some reason you're producing less value than you're costing, that arrangement and that agreement should cease to exist. So the other concerns I have in relation to that was, we need to create incentives that are merit-based. And actually, there is one thing I learned from being on the tip pool at the valet stand, and that was there were some incentives for those of us who turned in more money. If you turned in the most money out of that entire shift, you'd end up with a bonus. It'd be $20, $25, $30. I'm not going to go into the nuances of how they structured it. But there were components of meritocracy that I did like about that tip pooling that I also am bringing into this consideration of what it truly means to be employee ownership. How do you protect the rights of employees while respecting that agreement that they're there to do a job, they're there for a reason, and that reason, of course, is to work. So the big question, with all that being said, is what incentives should a social value enterprise put in place in order to accomplish its goals, to align with the values that we just discussed in the previous video? And really, the core incentives we're looking to do are designed to be competitive for top talent. They're designed to retain top talent. And more importantly, they're designed to properly allocate value at the end of the year based on the contribution of each employee. And that first incentive is a 10% profit sharing bonus that happens at the end of each year. The thing about that bonus, back to, I do not believe it should be everybody gets the same exact bonus. I think it is the perfect opportunity to take a cursory view of the last year and to look at the value each employee created. And so I believe that there's going to be a number of years where you have 100 employees and 25 of them participated in the profit sharing bonus, and the other 75, when you look at their metrics, they didn't actually bring value beyond their compensation, and therefore they wouldn't be participating in that pool. I don't think that's probably a little bit more aggressive. If it's 100, I'm hoping 75 people or 95 people are participating and 5 or 25 are not. But these are the realities. And even among those who are participating, someone might get an outsized bonus where they're seeing a $50,000 payday, and someone might get a $10,000 bonus. And that is all just going to be based on how we together come up with a system of accurately measuring the value each person brings, and leaving that process open to transparency, leaving that process open to debate. If someone says, what, I believe I deserve this, and the rest of the team says, actually, I don't, well, that's kind of put that subject matter out for the time. But if someone says, I believe, and then 10 other people say, what, they did do a lot more than what they're getting credit for, then we have a discussion and we reallocate those values. So I want it to be fair. I want it to be merit-based. And that's the nature of that first incentive. The next question on things is really, how can we create a system that allows for the separation of unproductive members? 10 years of entrepreneurship, guys, you got to understand how many people have been hired and fired here. And, the reality is the only reason people get fired is because either the business isn't able to pay them, can't make ends meet, or B, that person is just not able to do the job they were hired to do. And a lot of times that comes back to leadership. I'm not trying to completely say this is something that goes down to an employee level. But the truth is, we all know, we've worked with people, they're coworkers, they're slackers. How do you create a system where they are still considered valuable up until the time that they're not? And we all are in agreement, not just like management and leadership, but the entire body of employee owners is saying, look, we're here to do a job. We want to produce social value. We are the heroes of this world. And therefore, we cannot let people bleed us dry that are not productive, and sorry, bye-bye. So that's a question I'd like to continue to tease out as we move forward into what does it mean to have an employee-owned workplace. The other things that are really important for me and come to mind are, how can we create a system with the appropriate mobility? back to my experience, I was always a super bright, very, very talented person, but I was not college educated. I'm still not, for what it's worth. And there was never really a way for a company to identify who I was and what kind of value I could actually bring, because when I worked for them, I was swapping out tires on a car. When I worked for them, I was pushing grocery carts. When I worked for them, I was bringing bags of luggage to people's hotel rooms. They didn't know that I had this other way of bringing value, and I want to create a system where we can discover the talents and the skills and the value and the contribution that any member can bring, and that there actually is a path to mobility and advancement even outside of something as formal as an education or a degree. Same thing with leadership. I mean, that's the nature of that mobility. Who do you promote? How do you get them there? The truth of the matter is that's going to come from this system that we use to evaluate people for promotions. And then lastly, how can we create a system with the appropriate freedom? And that's going to really come down to voting. It's going to come down to what kind of annual votes are going to be taking place, what kind of democracy is really here. Like I said, I don't want it to be so much democracy that we're slowing down the growth of the company. I think all of these decisions map to impact, they map to growth, but they have to take in mind the sustainability, the meritocracy, and the democracy we're looking to bring into the fabric of what it means to be an employee owner. The last thing I'll say about that is not everyone will become an employee owner in this system, right? There's going to be a process where someone is newly hired. Over the course of following their work and their life, they end up vesting into full ownership. We're still teasing out some of those details because we just want to come up with a system that makes the most sense and that respects all the values we alluded to earlier. In either case, let's pick up that conversation, as it will be subject matter for future videos and debate and dialogue. But for now, that will end the second video of our series. Our next video is going to be about consumer ownership. So as always, remember to do good and to share with others. Cheers.